And good morning, everybody. Welcome and happy Easter to you. Happy Resurrection Sunday, as some of you have said. And it's so good to see you. I hope you guys are doing great here on April 20th, 2025. It's good to see all you guys in the comments already. I'll just say some good mornings. Emma Coombs, good morning to you. Good afternoon to you. Pam, it's good to see you. The Red Raven. Christine. We've got Laura and Stacy. Good morning. Alvin, good morning. And Rick. Looking up for him, Pilgrim, good morning. And let's see, Deborah, good morning. RLB, Flat Bob, good morning, good morning. Stacia, it's great to have all you guys. I hope you're doing great today. Flat Bob, thank you so much for that support. I certainly appreciate it. It's humbling, and I really appreciate you doing that each week. So thank you so much. Thank you very much. Good morning, Douglas, Dan, Adam, L. I guess that's L or it's L-E. And Pop. Good morning, all you guys. It's great to have you guys with us, even if you're brand new. Thank you for joining this morning. I think we're getting a lot of new people, and that's great. It's awesome. And it is probably because of some of the recent videos. And I think there's just some things happening out there causing people to look around a little more and starting to find our work, what we've been doing here on this channel for a long time now, for a few years. Of course, we started very small. And thankfully, it's growing. And that's, I say thankfully just because I'm glad we can all work together like we do. I think we have a very productive channel. I think that it really helps people in a lot of ways see some things that they hadn't seen before. And I don't mean things that are crazy or wild or fantasy. I'm talking about real things in the scriptures that people just aren't taught usually. And, to me, the awesome thing about this is that we're able to find a lot of those things and share them with each other and talk about them. So I am excited about that, and I'm really just grateful to God that I have new people coming into the channel at this time. So thank you so much if you are new and you're here with us this morning. Thank you for that. Let's see here. Go ahead and remember that I drive this morning session, this Sunday morning live stream, off of your topics, the things you guys want to talk about. I have one topic mentioned so far from Emma Coombs on Melchizedek. And so we can talk about him, but be ready to give your topic if there's something specific you want to hear about this morning, you want to talk about. Just to let you know, also, I have a topic that was mentioned to me this week about my Balaam video. So we're going to be talking briefly about the Balaam video, just a little extra information that was brought to my attention about Balaam and the whole situation with the Moabites and the Israelites in the, I think it's the Valley of Moab. And so there's just a little extra information we'll check there. We're also going to be doing our Bible reading this morning. So we'll be reading through and talking through Mark chapter 11 this morning. And it's going to get really interesting there because this is the chapter. This is when Jesus enters Jerusalem and enters the temple. So we're going to get to see a lot of interesting things start to unfold in Mark, starting here in chapter 11 today. And I don't know, I was looking through chapter 12. I'd love to go even further, but I don't know time-wise what we really want to do. So if you guys have good topics, then we can do that. If you don't, we could go further in the book of Mark if we wanted to today. And I think for Easter Sunday, this is that'd be appropriate. But we can do whatever you guys want to do. Pam Crane, I just got your topic, so I'll put that on my list. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's see. Anything else been mentioned here? I think I've gotten everything so far. I see, Christine, you mentioned something on Melchizedek as well, so we're going to go into that. I'll try to pull everything I have on him, and we'll just go through it a little bit. All right. Robert, you asked about the first resurrection. I'll pull that as a topic. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, let me go ahead and start the announcements. Flat Bob, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much. And yeah, catch us later. And have a safe trip there. Oh, thank you, Pam Crane, so much for that support. I really appreciate that. Christine, you mentioned Cain's lineage with the post from the top. The post from the top. I missed your question. Let me double check that, Christine. So. Okay, I got it now. Christine. I see it. Sorry about that. They go by really fast. Life goes by pretty fast. If you don't stop every once in a while to look around, you may miss it. Anybody know the movie? You know what movie that's from? Come on. You're welcome, Christine. Looking up for him, you have a question here. The purpose of the saints resurrected with Christ and what happened while they roamed the earth and afterwards. Okay, we can talk about that. Thank you. Looking for him. Looking up for him, Pilgrim. Okay, now we've got a list. Now we've got a list of topics. So anything from this point on might be hard to get to. Just a warning. Just a warning. Okay. Yeah, Christine, it was from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the movie. I make movie quotes all the time. I don't know. I don't do it as much on the channel, but that's the thing. I do that. Anyway. All right. Let me do the announcements real quick, guys, and let's go ahead and get started today. I know we've got a lot going on. Got a lot we're going to get to. So let me do that. Here on your screen, and a lot of you are very familiar with my website. The address is in the top left of your screen. But this is the website, bible-scribe.com. Just be aware it kind of tells you where all my stuff is all over the place. I've been doing the YouTube channel for just over 5 years. I've been doing these live streams on Sundays for about 2.5 to 3 years. And this does catalog all of that work. So for instance, down here you can scroll down and see lots of my different videos, actually hundreds. So, but this allows you at some level to search for them. You can find what you want here. There's some pages on the website that are simply research topics and have information. And then I have some series that all go together. So just be aware of that. And those are listed out on these different pages in series. Most of these have like a playlist on YouTube too, if you want that. So those links are all here. But be aware the website has almost everything. And it lists, of course, the different platforms I'm on. You'll see here YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, all these different ones. I mirror on Rumble. We're streaming on Rumble right now as well. And Truth Social, X, and Telegram. You can connect up with me in any of those ways. You'll note the Bible app tile right here on the front and at the beginning. The Bible app is the tool we will be using today. It is right here at biblescribeapp.com. And it is a way that I use this tool every day almost to search through writings, search through the Bible, find different things, take notes and cross-reference things. And so this tool allows you to do a lot of amazing things that you can't do many other places. So if I'll log in here, if you become a member on the site, which requires a simple $10 a month payment, you can search all of these writings. You'll notice on my screen there are about 40 plus writings that are included, including the Bible. We have different apocryphal writings, Baruch, Esdras, things like that, Enoch, the Deuterocanon. We have the Dead Sea Scrolls, not all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but a portion, and a lot of early Christian writings as well. So the amazing thing about that is, for instance, if you wanted to search for the word Antichrist, you would get results. You can get results across all of these different writings. So if I do that, it'll just show you see all the different writings that popped up. You can then click on them and see different references to the Antichrist in all of these writings. So that's just an example. There's many ways you can use this tool. Again, you can sign up on the website for a guest access, and that will let you into the system. You'll be able to take notes on a few different writings, but not all of them. But if you want full access, it's simply $10 a month, and you will find instructions for that, how to make the payment on the website. You can do it either through Give, Send, Go, and I have a campaign there where you can just pick how long you want, or you can do it monthly. And then on YouTube, there is a second tier membership. The first tier of membership on YouTube is just $5 a month, and that's just a support level, okay? But then if you go to the $10 a month monthly membership on YouTube, I will give you the membership on the Bible Scribe app as well. So that's up to you, however you want to do that. You can pay through that membership on YouTube, or you can do it on the Give, Send, Go. But that's a huge support for me and all the work I've put into this tool. I really want it to be useful and valuable to more people than just myself, if at all possible. So that being said, that's the Bible Scribe app, and you'll see me using that more today. And then the Cry channel is here and available. I will say this, I've made a number of videos, probably 60 or so, maybe more videos on the Cry channel, and I think there are a few that are going to be coming rather soon. Just be aware of that if you're interested in that and been following Cry at all. There will probably be a few coming soon that are going to be way out there. They're going to be just way out there. And, it is what it is. This channel is for me to just get things out that I kind of want to talk about and see what people think. Things that I feel like I'm seeing, feel like I'm understanding. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested in that, to look over there as well. All right, so that's kind of the story of what we're doing here. As far as the live stream today, just make sure you stay cordial in the chat with one another. We are really a church body. We are a body of believers. Just as the Greek word in the New Testament, koinonia, was an assembly of believers, we are an assembly from all over the world. All over the United States and all over the world. Even right now, we have people in other countries that are tuning in, and we thank you so much for doing that. But remember that we're a body of believers who pray for each other and care about each other. And so make sure you encourage each other and become a part of this body if that's what you want to do. As a Christian, that is our goal as being a part of the body of Christ, is to encourage, lift each other up, help each other with understanding. In some cases, rebuke each other if there's a problem. But we can do all of those things in a cordial way online in the chat here and work with one another. So I encourage you to do that. I usually don't have to intervene at all in the chat, so let's keep it that way. But other than that, this should be a great time this morning. So let's go ahead and start thinking about it. I would like to tell you guys kind of what I was doing this week. One interesting thing that happened this week was, and it is on my site here. So if you do a search on my site for Nazis, you will find that I've done a number of Nazi videos, videos concerning the Germans at the time of the Second World War. And I have these 3 videos. There's a whole YouTube playlist of these videos. So if I click here, it'll take us there and show you. I did a first, second, and third part to this series. And if I come up with some more things that I want to do as a part of this series, I'll continue to make some videos here. But this week, it was very interesting. The first of these videos, out of nowhere, and now this video has been live. You can see it. It was posted 8 months ago. This video had been live for 8 months with no problem. YouTube didn't care. it's just funny to me how YouTube will run some kind of strange algorithm at some random point in the history of a video and then decide that it is not what they want online. This video this week was taken down by YouTube, and I received a strike warning because it said that it included hate speech, which was interesting because the point in the video that it pointed to that said was hate speech was about the German festivals that they had during the time of the Second World War, the festivals where they would have these floats and parades, and they were celebrating their Germanic heritage. And the only thing being said at that point was that the Germans in those parades were celebrating their art and their heritage. Some of it, yes, a little pagan, but it was not some kind of occult magical ritual or anything. And those are the words. It was literally those types of words in that section, and they said it was hate speech. You know, I don't know who categorized it as hate speech. It's kind of ridiculous. So I let it simmer for a couple days. I just thought about it, but then I decided to go ahead and appeal that because I looked at the video and there was nothing even hinting at any kind of racial, thing or any hate towards any group, even any negative comments towards any group. So I did appeal that, and as of maybe it was yesterday or the day before, they removed the strike warning from the video, and it's back up. So I just wanted you guys to know that it's interesting how this all works out. I don't understand what really happened. It seems to me, if I had to guess, that YouTube ran some algorithm on the video because it has started getting, as you can see, it has gotten now 3,000 views. And that's getting up there. Compared to the other two, that's almost double what either of those got. And it seems like at some point when there's some popularity on a video, they will rerun some algorithms, maybe some stronger algorithms, to make sure that it is not violating what they consider to be their rules and terms. But apparently they ran some kind of rule against it and decided it was hate speech, even though there really wasn't any hate speech at all in it, or even a hint of negative connotation with anything that was in the video. So thankfully, when I appealed it, they took the warning down. It was just ridiculous that you have to deal with this kind of stupid stuff. But I thought I'd let you know that. Otherwise, this week, I don't know. There's a whole lot I was able to work on. I did add another writing into the Bible Scribe app, but I have not published that yet. So I was looking at some different writings that I want to add into the Bible Scribe app. There's actually a good number that I still want to add, specifically with some of the early Christian writings. So just so you know, that's where my focus is in the Bible Scribe app, adding some more early Christian writings, because I think those are so important for us to be able to read and cross-reference against the scriptures themselves. So, but as far as actual study on a particular topic, I think that there was a little bit of focus for me on the prophecy stuff, but I didn't have a ton of time. I really didn't. I was interrupted. I went down and I visited with my family this week, so I was, very off kilter as far as my study routine and all that stuff. So anyway, that's just how it goes. Stacia, you ask, have I heard anything in particular about what's going on in the Middle East? You say your kid is being sent over for 9 months starting in August. Ah, interesting. So yeah, Stacia, let's talk about that briefly. Let's make it a small topic here at the beginning. I think it's pertinent, and as you have a child in the military, I also have that same situation. So I'll give you what I know. What I know is that the military is mostly in the Middle East right now, focused on the Houthis in Yemen. Yemen is, let's show you kind of where it is. And let me bring this up on the screen. Let me just click here, Bible places. So Yemen As far as I understand, Yemen and you can see on the map here, this is, of course, the Middle East. Let me get my pen up so I can draw and point to things. Let me do that real quick. Okay. So let's go with bright yellow. No, let's stick with pink today. Pink is very visible. So, you know, the Mediterranean Sea here and the Suez Canal, which is what I just marked, and the Red Sea right here is of particular interest right now to our military. Okay, so what I know for a fact is that a lot of our military is in this area. As far as I understand it, we have a large number of assets in this area, the Suez Gulf or the Red Sea, if you will. And Yemen is in this area. Is that correct? I think I'm actually wrong. I think I'm a little too focused here. I think it's further out. Yeah. I'm wrong. It's further down. Hang on one second. I looked this up on a map yesterday just so I would know. And yeah, okay. So here's Yemen. You see it highlighted there at the bottom of Saudi Arabia. So I misspoke. I was a little too focused in there. We have had a lot of action then in the Mediterranean, coming through the Suez Canal and then into the Red Sea. So this area, we have a lot of assets. We have carriers, we have battleships, most likely, we have strike groups, and there's a lot of, we have a lot of air support, you know, coming from those carriers and different bases in the region. And it's all to work against and fight with the Houthi rebels, supposedly, that are in the Yemen area in Saudi Arabia. So this is the hotbed of activity right down here right now. They've been shooting at our ships and our planes, and there have been some very interesting reports coming out that sound like strange things have happened. We've had a report that came out that said we shot one of our own planes down. You have to ask yourself, is that really true? Or is that the military covering for the fact that they may have lost an asset? And so we had different things like that happen with some of our ships too, where there was a, quote, collision. You have to ask yourself, do you really think that we had a collision at sea between one of our ships and another one? So you can look back in the news. I won't go into articles or anything. You can see that stuff happening. So you know there is a lot of conflict going on. There's a lot of things happening. Now, of course, when we zoom back out here, you need to realize that Israel, of course, Israel right here, right? They are trying to get America to go over here with them and attack Iran. Okay, that's Iran. So Israel's trying to get us to join them to attack Iran. Now, it's interesting that all our assets, of course, being down here and attacking Houthis in Yemen, that's a pretty different approach. It's almost like they're asking us to do something completely different. So Israel's asking us to attack Iran. So far, Trump has refused those offers, said that we're not going to join you to attack Iran. Trump has said he wants to have diplomatic measures with Iran and solve it that way, which I 100% agree with. One other thing to be mindful of is that, oops, didn't mean to do that. Hold on. All right, so Syria is right there in the middle between Israel and Iran, okay? So Iran be over here, and Syria is right here in the middle. We pulled all our troops out of Syria just recently. Do you remember that, or did you hear that? So we have just removed ourselves from the battle between Israel and Iran. And just so you're aware too, Iran has called for Israel to, and all the Middle East, to surrender all nuclear weapons in an effort for peace. So Iran is calling for Israel to give up their nuclear weapons. Well, if you are paying attention when all the JFK files have been coming out, you realize that that was a huge contention between Israel and JFK before JFK was assassinated. That he wanted them to get rid of all their nuclear weapons, to not have nuclear weapons, and Israel pretty much snowed him and diverted him at every attempt. And so that's an interesting little point, that it all kind of comes full circle. And now we're again talking about Israel's nuclear weapons. So there's just a lot of interesting things happening right now in the Middle East. So I hope that, Stacia, that answers your questions. As far as boots on the ground, if your family member is perhaps, if your family member is in like the Army or Marines and is kind of like a boots on the ground soldier type, then I don't know as far as what the military's plans are for that. I don't know. So I just am not sure when or where that might happen. It I suppose might be possible that we would end up with, and we may already have, boots on the ground in the area of Yemen, but I don't know that for sure. I haven't really been following that closely. So does that help? Does that help at all? That's what I know and understand right now. That's what I understand right now. Linda, I got your topic of can women teach and preach God's word. I got your topic there. I don't know if we'll be able to get to it. We've got a lot now. Stacia, you say your son is Marines. Yeah. So they are front row. The good news is we have good military, and the likelihood is that most of our soldiers are very well protected. So let's just keep praying in that direction, that they are protected, and pray that our leaders don't make bad decisions about when and where to send them into battle or not. I would pray again that we can solve all these things in a diplomatic manner. There's literally no reason for war. Robert, you said I forgot to pray. I didn't forget. I just kind of went into this because it was asked of me. So, yeah, we're going to pray next. Deborah, you're having a conversation there about someone. Let's see. Try and see, Deborah, what you say. Prayer request for your husband. That's what I thought. So let's put that on our prayer list. I got that, Deborah. It just took me a second to get there. Okay. Well, let's go ahead then and pray. Let's do that and get started today. So if you wouldn't mind, put your prayer requests in the chat so people can see them if you would like. And if not, then maybe just let us know you do have a prayer request. Maybe it's a silent prayer request. You just need help, need prayer. But we will try to pray for those. And in the meantime, I will go ahead and bow my head and pray. So do that. If you have a request, let us know in the chat. Thank you. And I'll bow. Thank you, guys. Lord God, I do thank you for this time, this day we can be together. Thank you for the celebration of your Son, Jesus' resurrection. We give you the honor, praise, and the glory for all you did by sending your own Son, your firstborn, to come to earth, to provide the salvation to Israel that you had promised, but then also provide salvation to the world, and to put down all nations and powers, to break up the authority of the nations, and to then take authority and start to build the kingdom, which you will in the end hand over to your Father. And we give you such praise and glory, God, for all you have done through your Son. And thank you for the resurrection. Jesus' resurrection, Lord, being proof of our own resurrection in the end. We thank you for that. Help us today as we study and learn and listen and work together. Please guide us to the truth and help us to make the best and wisest interpretations and understandings of what we see being written to us, written for us, and just give us wisdom. And I pray for those in need this morning, and help us to pick up those prayer requests and take them with us through the week, Lord, and be mindful of each other. We give you the honor and the praise and the glory as the Most High God, and we do that through the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, guys. Good deal. Stacia, you said that YouTube deleted your comment about bricks. Great. Of course it did. I mean, YouTube is apparently they don't even want you to talk about things that they don't like. They won't let me even have a video about Nazis, let alone say anything bad about anyone other than the Nazis, or say that the Nazis might not have been so bad. If you even say things that hint at what they don't like, apparently they will try to ban you. Hide your stuff. Oh well. What can you do? Christine, you have a healthy grandson and answered prayer. That's great. I put that on my list. Give to our group. Okay. Yeah, Matt Benjamin, you say thank you to whoever gifted the memberships. That was Flat Bob. I'll give him full credit. Flat Bob is doing that, and it's really, really appreciated. It's really cool. So, good morning, Susan. Good to see you. And Linda, it's good to have you, by the way. I don't know if I said good morning to you. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started today then with our Bible reading. And we're going to start, of course, I didn't change the title. We're going to start, though, in Mark chapter 11 this morning. So let's do that. And we will bring it up on the screen. Start going through Mark chapter 11. Now, last week or last time, I can't remember if the video, let's see, what did I do? Yeah, Mark 10 was the last live stream, so that was last Sunday. I didn't get to do a video this week, which I wanted to do, but I just didn't get the time to do it. So let's look in chapter 10 briefly and remember what we did there. The Pharisees tempted Christ on the idea of divorce. We talked a little bit about that. I do remember that now. I kind of pointed everyone to my divorce and marriage video that I did a long time ago. And then he says, receive the kingdom as a little child. He's talking about children and just the spirit or the faith that needs to be in a man for him to accept. And then also warns against, of course, stopping people from coming in a childlike faith. And then he has a rich young man came to him and wanted to know what he could do to inherit eternal life. And Christ told him you had to give away everything and then follow me, and he couldn't do it. And so Christ talked about that and how hard it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom. Let's see, what else did we do down here? James and John asked Christ, wanting to be at his side in heaven at the throne, asked what they had to do, and Christ said, you need to be a servant. The first will be last, the last will be first. You need to be a servant to be great in my kingdom. And then at the end, it looks like they came to Jericho and healed blind Bartimaeus. And that's what we ended on last week. So that is where we start chapter 11. So let's go ahead and I'll make it a little bigger here so you can see it well, hopefully. Ooh, that's nice and big. Okay. Chapter 11, verse 1, when they came nigh to Jerusalem, unto Bethpage and Bethany, at the Mount of Olives. Now, let's map out these things. Again, you know me. I like to know exactly where we're talking about. So we are near Jerusalem, which is right there on your map. Let me circle it so you see Jerusalem right there. So that locates us. Now Bethany, I'm trying to remember. I have Bethlehem marked here south of Jerusalem. You'll notice Bethlehem south of Jerusalem. But I think, let me look up Bethany real quick. I'm not sure that that's location of Bethany. Bible map Bethany. Let's just look that up real fast. Okay, so Bethany is just east of Jerusalem according to this map. So let's just say just east of Jerusalem. Bethany would be in this area. So it's just very close. But that's where, by the way, if you'll notice, it might be in this chapter, but you'll notice throughout Christ's time from here on, after he comes to Jerusalem, he's staying overnight in Bethany and then coming back into the city during the day. So you start to realize he's coming back and forth each day, with some of his time spent in Bethany, and then other time, the rest of his time during the day, he's in Jerusalem. So that kind of gives you the idea of how this works. He's not staying in Jerusalem with the disciples. All right, so let's go back and start reading a little further. The Mount of Olives, as it says here, just be aware that's between the areas we were just talking. So between Jerusalem and Bethany, but closer, of course, to Jerusalem. It's right across the valley. Kidron is the Mount of Olives. Verse 2, he said to them, "Go your way into the village over against you, and as soon as you are entered into it, you will find a colt tied, whereon a man has never sat. Loose him and bring him. And if any man says to you, 'Why do you do this?' say ye that the Lord has need of him, and straightway he will send him hither." And they went their way and found the colt tied by the door without, in a place where two ways met, and they loosed him. And certain of them that stood there said, "Why are you doing that, loosing the colt?" And they said unto them, even as Jesus had commanded, and they let them go. So all of this happened. Jesus told them to go in and find this colt. It would be tied there, and to just take it. And when the person asked them about it, Jesus told them everything he was going to say, and he said it exactly as he expected. And then, of course, the man let them take the colt. So Jesus knew exactly what was going to happen, essentially predicted it, and then it happened exactly the way that he said. So the disciples brought the colt, in verse 7, to Jesus and cast their garments on him, meaning they cast, blankets or things over the colt so he could sit on it, and Jesus sat on the colt. And remember when it's often talking about disciples in these passages, that it means more than just the 12. He did have a number of disciples that were simply just following along with them everywhere they went, along with townspeople and whoever was attracted to the event, the gathering of people. So there were a lot of people around, right? But Jesus sits on the colt. Many spread their garments in the way on the ground, and others cut down branches off the trees and strew them in the way. And they that went before and followed. So there were people that were walking in front of Christ on the colt, and people walking behind Christ on the colt, saying, "Hosanna, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord." Now, this is interesting. I just had this interesting thought on the Ark of the Covenant. It just made me wonder if we have any good information on the way that the Ark of the Covenant procession was said to have occurred in the scriptures. I wonder if the Bible tells us that, because I guess what I was thinking is that it's possible that this idea of some of the people walking in front of the colt with Christ and some walking behind was similar to the procession that the Jews had with the Ark of the Covenant. If you remember, the Ark of the Covenant was really made of wood, but it was overlaid in gold. So it looked gold. It was just overlaid wood. And it had the two cherubim on the top, on the top of the ark. That's why you always see, for instance, in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, you see the two angels with their wings pointed at each other. that's kind of like what we're talking about. But of course, the cherubim had 6 wings each. So, you can imagine this was a pretty majestic looking, box. So the ark looked like it was pure gold, but then of course they had poles that were attached to it so that it could be carried, because if any of the Israelites touched the ark, of course they would be killed. They would die according to the decree of God. So if you just imagine in your head the procession of the Israelites carrying the ark, if it was something like this, perhaps, I don't know if it was, but it was probably something a little different than this. But you just kind of think about that. Was Christ the pointer of that? Was he the emblem that was being symbolized with the Ark of the Covenant and the cherubim being carried and processed with the Israelites? I don't know, but it's an interesting thought. It just came to my head as we were reading that. So it's just something to think about. So as they were doing this, they went before and followed him, saying, Hosanna, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed be the kingdom of our father David that comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. So be aware that the people here were understanding that this was the kingdom coming in. This was Christ's kingdom starting, okay? And they knew it, many of these people. Maybe all the disciples, the 12 disciples, weren't quite sure yet. As we've talked about, they were a little hard-headed, but there were people that definitely understood what Christ was saying. The kingdom was coming, and they were heralding it with this procession of Christ into Jerusalem. So, very interesting stuff here. Then in verse 11, Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple, and when he had looked around about on all things, now the eventide was come, meaning it was becoming, I believe that means it was becoming the end of the day. It was starting to get dark, perhaps. Let's see if I can find the word eventide. Definition, evening. It just means evening, of course. Okay, that's what I thought. So as it was becoming evening, it says, again, he went out to Bethany with the 12. As I mentioned, he went to Bethany to stay each evening. So he would be in Jerusalem, but then he would travel over to Bethany to stay for the evening. So it says in verse 12, on the morrow, the next morning, when they were come from Bethany, so again they came out from Bethany, went back to Jerusalem, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree afar off having leaves, he came, if haply he might find anything thereon. And when he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for the time of figs was not yet. And Jesus answered and said to it, no man eat fruit of thee hereafter forever. And his disciples heard it. Now this is interesting. We're going to find that this refers to something that I think is kind of finished later on. But the fig tree, he walks past and there were nothing but leaves on it. There was no figs. And it says the time of figs was not yet. But Jesus said to the tree, no man will eat fruit of you forever hereafter. And his disciples heard him say it. And that's all we get right now. Let me see if this continues further on in this chapter, because I think it does. Fig tree, yes. Okay, so it's going to continue in a second. So just keep this in your mind for now. Now, as he's come back into Jerusalem for the day, he sees the fig tree and he essentially curses it, saying that no man is going to eat off you anymore, ever. And then in verse 15, when they had come into Jerusalem, Jesus went into the temple, and he began to cast out those that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrow the temple tables of the money changers, and the seats of those that sold doves. So, as you may know, they had turned the temple into a business, okay? And you can imagine this. Because of the system of sacrifices, they had monetized that, okay? And so The money changers would come in and set up shop in the temple so they could sell the sacrifices to the people as they came in. Instead of course, people bringing their own sacrifices. So they, in that sense, I don't think were even doing what the Old Testament had talked about, the Mosaic Law had talked about as far as their sacrifices. They would come into the temple and simply buy a sacrifice. Whether those were even pure and like good sacrifices or not, nobody could know. And the people selling those animals may have been selling blemished animals. Who knows how bad it was. But in any sense, it was bad that they had turned the sacrificial system into a money-making, profit-based routine. And so these money changers and sellers of sacrificial doves and other animals were in the temple, and Christ starts throwing their tables over and saying, that's wrong, obviously. It says Jesus would not allow any man carry a vessel through the temple. So that's an interesting statement. Let's come back to this. Jesus went into the temple and cast out those that sold and bought in the temple, overthrew the tables and the seats of the dove sellers. And he would not allow any man carry any vessel through the temple. That's very interesting. I don't know that I've paid much attention to this verse before. Carry any vessel. And he would not permit anyone to carry a vessel, skeus, interesting, through the temple. I'm trying to understand this word vessel. It's strange to me. It's through Strong's, it says, a vessel to contain liquid, a vessel of mercy or wrath. So apparently this is the same word that's used in talking about humans as vessels. But it says, any instrument by which anything is done, a household utensil, a ship's tackle, derived from a primary root meaning to contain or hold. To me, this sounds like it just has to do with his throwing out of these people and the sacrificial system, that perhaps he meant, I don't know if it means a vessel like something that contains something else. That's the way we would think of it in the English. But I think it really kind of, as far as what I'm seeing, it refers to the implements of sacrificial, system. So he was not allowing anyone to carry sacrifices through the temple, apparently, or sacrificial, implements, utensils. That's what it sounds like here. So Christ really sounds like Christ kind of brought the sacrifices to a stop that day, which is very interesting in terms of, for instance, Daniel chapter 9 that says that he would cause the sacrifices and oblations to stop. I'm not saying that is absolutely that's the reference here. This is the first time I've really thought about this very hard. But it does sound like Christ stopped the money changers and the selling of sacrifices, and then it sounds like he wouldn't even let anyone carry anything through the temple. And yes, Stacia, you said, aren't we considered vessels? Yes, we are. But this verse is saying he would not allow anyone in the temple to carry a vessel through the temple. So this to me has more of that emphasis on the meaning of the word being like a utensil or an implement of the sacrifice. Either like a dove, like if they had bought a dove, that would mean the dove. And if it meant like other things, maybe, I don't know, what do you take to a sacrifice? Whatever they had that had to do with sacrifice, that to me is what it sounds like. And then Jesus starts to teach them. After he stops all this nonsense, he starts to teach them, is it not written that my house will be called a house, shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. And the scribes and chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished at his doctrine. Of course, the scribes and chief priests were mad because he had kind of stopped all of the sacrificial stuff going on, and everyone was just like, can you imagine? It probably was like pin drop. Like Jesus had just thrown over all this stuff and made a ruckus, and then as everyone realizes what is happening, it probably just goes quiet, and then Christ is saying at the top of his lungs, is it not written that my house will be called of all nations the house of prayer? But you have made it a den of thieves. And of course, the scribes and chief priests were livid, and they decided they wanted to try to kill him. And this is why at this point we may realize why Christ up until now had been telling a lot of people, like, don't talk about me, don't go and tell other people about what I've done. Some of that had happened before, right? Depending on, like, I think it may have been blind Bartimaeus we just read about. He wanted this stuff to be able to happen. If they had known he was coming, then he wouldn't have been able to do some of this, right? So maybe that's part of the why he was kind of keeping things quiet for a while there. So in verse 19, after these people have heard Christ speak and they were astonished, it said, when evening was come, he went again out of the city, probably back to Bethany. And in the morning, as they passed by, they saw this fig tree again, didn't they? The fig tree, and it was dried up from the roots. So the previous day, the fig tree had been fine. It just hadn't borne any fruit yet. It didn't bear any figs. And I don't know that it was, it sounded like, so if we go back to the first spot we looked at, it said that the time of figs had not yet come. So it's not that the tree was dysfunctional. It was simply that its time had not come for the bearing of fruit, but yet Christ cursed it to never bear fruit. So we need to realize that this is going to be an important symbol for us. So here in verse 20, they passed by this next morning after Christ had thrown the money changers out of the temple. The next morning as they come into the city, they see the same tree, and it's dried up from the roots. Probably leaves are brown, they're falling off in some cases. It is totally dried up, and it's dead. Peter, calling to remembrance, said to Christ, Master, behold, the fig tree which you cursed is now withered away. And Jesus answered and said to them, have faith in God. Interesting. He continues, for verily I say to you, whoever shall say to this mountain, be thou removed and cast into the sea, shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe in those things which he says shall come to pass, he shall have whatever he says. Now this is interesting. I think sometimes we mangle this verse. We use this verse for so many things in Christianity. People say, oh yes, you have faith like a mountain. You say to the mountain, it'll be moved, and cast in the sea, it will. And then we sing songs about our mountains crumbling and faith-moving mountains. We want to make it so much about us. But this verse really isn't about him. And look at what it says. It says, anyone who says to the mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, and will not doubt it in his heart. But then what does it say? But shall believe that those things which he says come to pass, shall have whatever he says. Therefore I say to you, what things you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, you will have them. So he's giving a formula for doing things, having power, and doing things that will be effective in the world. And when you stand praying, he says, forgive if you have aught against any, that your Father also which is in heaven may forgive your trespasses. So he's giving them a lot of advice here. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses. So this was the end of the fig tree story here. Now, I'm tempted now to go and do this search because I want to know more about this fig tree, and you probably do too. Let me do this real quick. So I've searched for fig tree, And what I want to see is, what does Matthew, for instance, say about this? Let's look at this real quickly. This is what Matthew says. So Matthew 21:19. This is going to be important for us. He came to the fig tree, saw nothing thereon, only leaves, and said, "Let no fruit grow on you forever." And the fig tree, now in this case, in Matthew, it says it withered away immediately. Well, it probably just didn't go to the length of talking about it was the next day when they came or all that. But when the disciples, it said in Mark, it was Peter, but it says when the disciples saw it, they say, "Wow, the fig tree is withered away." And Jesus says, "If you have faith and doubt not, you will not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but you will say unto this mountain, be removed and cast into the sea, and it will be done." So it's the same response. I'm trying to get a parallel here so we can understand what is meant by this. Now, Jesus in this case sounds like he's telling the disciples, you can too wither a fig tree. Now, what does that mean? Like, why would you want to wither a fig tree? That's what I'm trying to get to. So there's no other detail in Matthew 21 there. So let's continue to look here. Where else is this talked about? I don't know, because, you know, in Mark 13, we're going to get a parable of the fig tree. But I don't know that that is a relevant parallel to what we're seeing here. I don't know that that's relevant. I think that what I'm thinking, and you guys might have your own thoughts and opinions on this too. The fig tree here, I'm not going to say that it necessarily represents something, but maybe it does, okay? Maybe it does. You'll do notice that we need to notice the context, especially in Mark, you know, that's given to us. He enters the city one day. The fig tree has leaves, but it has not brought forth fruit, okay? Jesus curses it. He knows that it's, well, for whatever reason, okay, he curses it and says, no one's ever going to eat fruit from you again. And then what happens? He goes into the city and he curses, essentially. He curses the chief priests and scribes. He throws their tables over. He says, you've made my house into a den of thieves. So to me, in my mind, the parallels here is that this is a representation of what Christ is doing in Jerusalem. The fig tree, to me, represents, and I think this is speculative on my part, but to me, in this case, the fig tree represents Jerusalem or Israel, essentially. And if you remember back, now he does say after this, he says, in response to Peter here, he says, you know, the response to them asking about, well, this fig tree is withered away, the one you cursed, Lord. And he says, well, you're going to be able to do that too. And it makes me think of earlier that we read in Mark, where Christ is sending the disciples to these different cities in Galilee, to Israelites. And he says, what does he say? If they don't take you in, you leave the city and you shake the dust off your feet. Essentially, that's kind of like a curse in a way. But he says then to them that it'll be worse for those cities in the day of judgment than it was for Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, do you remember that? Now, to me, that is kind of like what we're seeing here. He's saying you get your chance, but you haven't produced fruit. You're cursed now, and it's going to be worse for you than Sodom and Gomorrah. In the same way, I think this fig tree is a representation of that. And it shows this happening, this withering away, the cursing and the withering, in the same time frame as he's going into Jerusalem and cursing the money changers and the scribes and Pharisees in the temple. And so, to me, it all parallels and makes sense. Israel, from this point on, if this is a correct symbolic parallel, okay, and Israel is the fig tree that is cursed, it will never again bear fruit. Do you see that and the implications of that? That's a big deal. If Israel is being talked about here, and Christ says from this point forward, you're never going to bear fruit for any man. Now, what does that imply not only then for Israel, for the next 40 years before the judgment in 70 AD, but then for all time, that Israel would no more bear fruit for any man? What does that say to you? It is something I think we should think about. That, if all these things connect the way that I'm talking about them, then this connects to Daniel, where it says that the sacrifices and oblations stop, and then it was going to be left desolate. Daniel says your house will be left desolate unto you. And so many of the prophecies say that too. But I believe truly that perhaps this is Christ talking about the fact that Israel is from this point forward cursed like the fig tree. All the things that God was doing through Israel would no longer be done through Israel. No longer. So it's something to think about. If Israel's the fig tree, it will never again produce fruit for God. Okay? It's a very interesting and sobering thought. Excuse me. All right. So where are we here? Let's continue. After he tells the disciples they will be able to curse just like he did, and forgive others. He says, forgive others so that your Father will forgive you. And then that's the end of that little narrative about the fig tree. Okay, so verse 27 in chapter 11. They come again to Jerusalem, and as he is walking in the temple, there come to him the chief priests, scribes, and the elders. So he comes back into Jerusalem the next day, and right there to meet him are the priests and scribes who he just threw over their money changers' tables and stopped their sacrifices the prior day. And they say to him, by what authority do you do all these things? You come into the temple, you've thrown over the money changers' tables, and we can't now sell the sacrifices. Everything's messed up. By what authority are you doing all of this? And Jesus says to them, I will ask you one question, and you will answer me, and by that I will tell you what authority I do these things. The question he asked them, now I think this is interesting. The baptism of John, was it from heaven or of men? Answer me. Now he's not talking about John the Baptist's personal baptism when he was baptized. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the baptism that John does. He's baptizing all these people in the Jordan. These chief priests and scribes, they know all about John the Baptist, okay? They know all about it. Of course, John had been beheaded by this time. But the question is pertinent. Was the baptisms that John did, was that from heaven or was it from men? And they reasoned with themselves, and they said, well, if we say from heaven, he will say, then why didn't you believe him? And if we say of men, then they were afraid of the people because the people generally believed that John was certainly a prophet, if not more, okay, because of what he did. He came and talked about and did with the people in the Jordan with the baptisms. And so they answered and said to Jesus, we cannot tell. They thought they were going to be dodging the bullet here. But then Jesus says, well, neither then will I tell you by what authority I do these things, because he knew their hearts. In fact, Jesus knew this question was a trap for them. He knew that they were going to be trapped by this question. That's why he knew he would be able to, he didn't want to, by not telling them any more about himself, he was refusing to, quote, cast his pearls before the swine. Do you see that? He wasn't casting his pearls before the swine. He wasn't going to take time with these backwards, religious, wicked priests and scribes. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of discussing the true things of heaven and of his own glory and the glory of the Father. He wasn't going to discuss that with these people, okay? So he knew this would shut them up and it would trap them in a way they could not answer. And they couldn't answer. Because yes, if they acknowledged that John the Baptist had come from heaven, then they would be responsible for what he taught, which was that the kingdom was at hand. Because that's all that John taught. Remember, the kingdom is at hand. You must repent and believe and be baptized. That was the whole message. Okay. So Christ catches them and they have no answer. And in so kind, Christ gives them no answer about himself and his Father in heaven. So all that sums up chapter 11 in Mark. A ton of stuff going on. I'm so interested in talking more about Mark chapter 12 and 13 as we go forward. I think we will go ahead and stop today in Mark, but that, man, I just love going through this. It's so important, especially what's coming. You know, we're getting up to his crucifixion. This stuff is going to be so important to understand. I hope that that helps. But that is Mark chapter 11, so I guess it's time to get into some of our topics for the day. Topics for the day. All right. So let's see. I do have one thing I wanted to mention. I wanted to mention this, and this is me, and I'm going to waste a little bit of time on it, but not too much. I wanted you to know this. On Easter. Now, we talked last week about Easter, and then I clipped that and made a video of just that segment last week. Well, there's something that was brought to my attention this week, and this is one thing I did do this week I looked at. I want you to see that on the website, I went ahead and made a page on Easter. If you just come down to Topics for Research right here, and then Easter, you can click it. And it shows some interesting stuff. For instance, it links to that video I made. But also, I found this out this week because I had someone challenge me on this. The person that challenged me, let me see if I can find this video and the comment that was made. I want to give credit where credit's due because this was good. So on the Easter video, where I talk about all of this. Let's see if I can get to the newer one. Yes. So this person with the alias Lakeworth Gator said to me, can you tell me where everybody knows that they connected Ishtar with Easter and pagan fertility celebrations? And where does that come from? Besides, he mentions a few other references, but he would like to know what the references are for that. So I had to admit in my response that I think that this guy called me on this. Because in the video, if you remember, I said that, you know, everybody knows that Easter is related to Ishtar and the goddess worship, the fertility worship of the ancient pagan religions. Now, I said that because at the time I didn't want to really expound on that. I felt like I've talked about that stuff before, but a lot of people do agree that that is the origin of the word Easter. A lot of people say that. But this person challenged me a little bit. So here's what I did. I started looking a little further and I found out some interesting information. I started looking for eggs, like what do eggs mean in terms of Easter and the celebration of Easter? There are some ancient pagan connections, and I'm gonna kind of show you those. So there's an ancient Persian celebration to their god called Nowruz, something like that, from Zoroastrianism. Now, Zoroastrianism, by the way, was the basis of much of Gnosticism, which, of course, it did, I believe, infiltrate the Catholic Church in some regard. And as time progressed in the Roman Catholic Church, I think some of that paganistic practice was just absorbed right into Roman Catholicism. I particularly feel, personally, and I have more research to do on this, I particularly feel the Valentinian Gnostics infiltrated the Catholic Church very early on, okay? But this ancient Persian celebration of Nowruz included painted eggs and the spring equinox. You know, at the spring equinox, they would celebrate this Persian god, and they would do it with painted eggs. And that was even still is done in Iran to this day. Okay, so the celebration of Nowruz. Now, in Ukraine, there is a celebration where they create pisanki eggs. These are very beautiful eggs. I'll show you a picture real quick. They're really cool. But this is a pisanki egg. They're unbelievably detailed and hand-painted. They're really pretty. But in the Ukraine area, and this was known in references prior to the 10th century, so in the medieval times, these eggs were made as offerings to the sun at the return of spring, at the spring equinox, just like all these other pagan celebrations, to protect and usher in a season of light and protect from evil. Okay, so they would make these eggs and, quote, offer them to the sun god in the Ukraine area, even as early as the 10th century or prior. Now, there's a Chinese deity named Pangu that was started from being birthed from an egg, and this was said to be the ruler of the universe. Okay, so this is very primordial in Chinese religion, but this deity Pangu was supposedly started from an egg. Now, I don't have any references that have told me that they celebrate Pangu with eggs, but it was a reference to me that was at least pertinent, that the, quote, cosmic egg theory that's very Gnostic and Hermetic may have had some kind of roots in Eastern religion like this, of Pangu, the Chinese deity. Now, in the 7th century, it looks like the Venerable Bede, a Christian Catholic, I believe, he was fascinated by the dating of Easter, and he is the one where we get the idea, I believe, that Easter was some kind of pagan thing. Now, this is where most people, I think, get this. He was fascinated by Easter, and he postulated in his book, The Reckoning of Time, that the word Easter derived from an Anglo-Saxon goddess, Oester, okay? Or Aoster, however you say that. This is an Anglo-Saxon goddess, and you'll see more references to this, okay? But that would be Anglo-Saxon, so that's like Germanic. That's Northern European. That's not necessarily from the area that, for instance, the pagan Persian religion came from. The Zoroastrianism, that was from Persia, so that's very far east from Israel in the Middle East. But we're talking now about Northern Europe when we talk about Anglo-Saxon gods and goddesses. Jacob Grimm, the one who wrote Grimm's fairy tales, suggested that eggs were a symbol of early European paganism. Again, the same type of Anglo-Saxon paganism that Venerable Bede talked about. Now, in Greek Orthodox Christianity, there is a legend that Mary Magdalene went to the Emperor of Rome and told him of Jesus' resurrection, apparently in the early 1st century. Now, this is a legend. Nobody knows if this happened or not, I guess, but I don't know if there's any references to this story written anywhere, but this is a legend, apparently. But that Mary told the emperor at that time about the resurrection. I guess the emperor would it have been Tiberius? No, that's wrong. That's too early. Anyway, Roman emperor. I won't look it up. It's not important. The emperor's response to Mary apparently was along the lines of, "Oh, right, and those eggs over there are red too." So he said this in a sort of sarcastic sense. But then, according to the legend, the bowl of eggs turned red, and Mary Magdalene began then to preach Christianity to the emperor at the time. So, very interesting legend. We have no way to verify at all. But in Greek Orthodox Christianity, they say this is why we use eggs at Easter. I don't know, but whatever. To me, it's like, well, that's as good a story as any. Now, I felt like after this, and I did some more research on the Germanic line of thinking. And I think that from what I can tell, most of the practices we have today with eggs relating to Easter or the spring equinox has to do with the ancient Germanic tribes, okay? Ancient paganism in Northern Europe. Not necessarily the Persian line of thinking or the Far Eastern line in China. It seems to me that most of this comes from ancient Germanic lands. So we're talking about Northern Europe, Germany, Norway, all those areas. And it does seem pagan to me, and it always concerns the spring equinox, which of course is as we said last week, that's the time at which the new year starts, even in the Jewish calendar. And that's the time from which we determine Passover, and then, of course, the Resurrection Sunday after Passover. So all these things do seem to connect. Just so you're aware, the rabbits also seems to come from ancient Germanic writings. The character Easter Bunny first appeared in 16th century German literature. Adolf Holtzmann, he's apparently a researcher, says that in his book on Dutch or Deutsch mythology, the German mythology, he says the Easter hare is inexplicable to me, but probably was the hare or rabbit, the sacred animal of Ostara. Now this would have been the same goddess of Germanic tribes that was mentioned by the Venerable Bede, Ostara. And he says there's also a rabbit on the statue of Abnoba, which was another god of the Germanic peoples. It says Abnoba was a goddess of the Gauls, so probably similar to Ostara. Okay, so all of it ties back to ancient Germanic practices, and it was pagan practices. And it seems that the eggs and the rabbits, they all did have to do with the fertility of the spring. But I just wanted to show you this because of all this stuff, even though I said last week that Easter was derivative of Ishtar, I could find no specific references that connected Easter with Ishtar or Isis or Inanna, which is the Babylonian derivative of that. So just be aware there that when we say things, we've got to be sure we can back those things up. And I appreciated this comment this week from this person that called me out on that in a nice way and was supportive, but helped me see that we needed to research a little more. So that's what I did. I just wanted to show you guys that information so you're aware. And you can perhaps add that to your knowledge. And yes, Pam Crane, rabbits are considered unclean to eat. I did think about that too. You know, the ideas that come out of the Epistle of Barnabas about uncleanliness of rabbits, it's because of their sexuality that they're considered unclean, right? In fact, they're seen as, what was the specific thing about rabbits? I don't want to really go there and open that passage up, but it talks about the sexuality of rabbits being the reason they were seen as unclean, because again, all the laws pointed to things in the animal world, the uncleanness of animals, that were behaviors that the Israelites were not supposed to exhibit. So those were the animals that were unclean. So anyway. All right. Let's do our next topic. Let's go into our stuff now. The next topic I'm going to start with is from Mr. Rick. Thank you for this topic, Rick. And it is about Balaam. My video on Balaam, which is not too old. I only did it, I don't know, not too long ago. Let's see here. I should be listed rather soon back here. Yeah, right here. I used Shrek as my Balaam, which I thought was pretty fun. But there you go. There's Shrek and the donkey. So I did this on Balaam, and the interesting thing about that was I taught all about this scenario that occurred in Moab with the Israelites. And I went into detail, but just to briefly kind of go back to what happened, the valley of Moab, if I'm not and I think I'm saying it all right, but go back and watch my video if you have questions about this. But Israel at the north end of the Dead Sea had camped in this area. It's called the Valley of Moab, if I'm not mistaken, because Moab and all that was down here, the Moabites. And what happened was Balak was a king of, let's see, where's Balak? I'm trying to remember all my references from this. Balak was, Balak was king of Moab. And he had brought Balaam in. Balaam, by the way, was from Egypt, of course. I mean, he had been living in Egypt. And so he brought Moab or Balaam in so that he could gain an upper hand against the Israelites. The Israelites were all camped here in this valley, and King Balak was over here, and they were looking at them going, oh my goodness, there's so many, they're going to attack us. Because the Israelites had just come from the north, because they had just defeated Og of Bashan and his entire army. Okay, so they knew about this. The Moabites were fearful. Balak tries to get Balaam to curse Israel so that they will not be able to win the war that they're about to fight, they see coming. But what ends up happening, and when I did the video, I was in the book of Jasher in chapter 85. So if I go over there, I think I've got, let's see, if I just go Jasher 85, boom, there it is. So Jasher 85, we will see that, let's see here, Balak. Yeah. Balak sent messengers to Balaam and said, there's a people coming out of Egypt and they cover the face of the earth. This is the Israelites he's talking about. They're coming against me. And so Balaam came to Balak to curse Israel, but God told him, do not curse this people. So Balaam, if you remember, had been told, don't curse my people. And that was the whole story of the donkey, because he was going to meet up with Balak and the Moabites to curse Israel, and God was trying to stop him and tell him, you shouldn't do this. That was the whole thing. But what happens here, and the question really was Balaam judged because he was responsible for the fornication of the Moabites with the Israelites? So what happened at the end of this story is when the Israelites were camping in this valley, that instead, so Balaam did not curse them. Okay, he refused because of what God had told him. But what happened next in the book of Jasher was that the Moabites start enticing the Israelites by putting their daughters out front of their camp, dressed up in gold and jewels and all this stuff. And the daughters of Moab would entice the Israelites to come over and fornicate with them. And it was to weaken them. They would feed them also meat and foods that had been sacrificed to their gods, their pagan gods. And so in doing all this, they were weakening the Israelites, and also in some cases causing them to worship these pagan gods, the idols of the Moabites. So in my video on Balaam, that's all I said, because in the book of Jasher in chapter 85, that's what's said about it. But what's interesting and was brought to my attention is that in the book of, let's see where it is. Let's do a search here real quick for Balaam, because it is in the New Testament mentioned a little differently. Revelation chapter 2, verse 14. Now you'll notice here, verse 14. Now, when he is talking about the church of Pergamos, which is interesting as far as the location of that, I believe Pergamon was in Turkey, in western Turkey, okay, near the ocean, near the Mediterranean, but in western Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. He says, write these things, and he says, I know your works. You dwell where Satan's seat is, and you hold my name and have not denied the faith, even when Antipas was the martyr, and he was slain among you where Satan dwells. I have a few things against you, because you here hold to the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak. This would be Balak, the king of the Moabites. It says, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Okay, it goes on, though, about the Pergamons, but this is an interesting detail, because the book of Jasher did not say this. Okay, did not say that Balaam told Balak to go ahead and trick the Israelites into eating idol food and committing fornication with them. But apparently in the book of Revelation, John accuses Balaam of that thing. That Balaam, instead of cursing Israel, which he didn't do, but then he just told Balak, well, what you could do is you could trick the Israelites, send out your daughters, cause them, you will really mess them up, because he knows that in a way, Balaam was trying to get Balak to trick the Israelites out of serving God. So that's interesting if that's the truth. And that really is, if that all fits together. Perhaps Balaam did do this thing, and so Balaam was responsible for what happened with Israel and the Moabites. Even though he didn't curse Israel, he taught Balak a way that he could get at Israel without him having to curse them. So perhaps Balaam never learned his lesson. I think in the video I did over here, I think I kind of may have made it sound a little positive towards Balaam, like at least he didn't do what God told him not to do, which is true to a point. Maybe I was a little too positive there. But what we see in Revelation here is that Balaam was still trying to connive against God's people. And he did it with Balak to a point where they committed these whoredoms, these fornications with the Moabitess women, and they ate the idol food and all this other stuff, and it weakened Israel. And so, it does seem like to me, Rick, that this is probably what happened, and I don't have a problem with that. I do wish I could add that to my video, but it's one of those things. So this is just very interesting details that we now learn a little bit more. We grow, we learn, we add to our knowledge here. That perhaps Balaam was, he was just wicked through and through, regardless of the fact that he had kind of followed what God said, but then not really, All right. Let's do it then. Let's go on to our next topic. Go a little further here. What is next? Emma Coombs asks about Melchizedek. Let's do Melchizedek. Now, I hope I can find all the information that I have on Melchizedek. It's a very wide topic, but let me see what I can get to here. Let's see. I will go. All right, Melchizedek. I'm looking something up here. And let's see if I can just pop this open and share it with you guys. This is just kind of my raw notes. King Melchizedek. There is, by the way, of course, a writing, the Dead Sea Scroll 11Q13, that is called The Coming of Melchizedek. Very interesting writing. It looks like there's some length to it. I don't know if we want to go into all of this. I don't know how much we want to go into. It's time sensitive here. The word Melchizedek, by the way, is Melech. It's a combination of two Hebrew words, Melech and Zedek. Okay? And that Melech is king or prince, and Zedek is righteousness. It's rightness. Okay? So it's king of righteousness is what it means, as is said right here. And you can look those words up. It's Strong's 4442, 6662, 6664, and 4428 will give you the information on there. So Melchizedek mentioned in a lot of different writings. Let's see if this will give us some of that. Mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls a number of times. Let's do this. Let's start in the Bible. Let's just read what it says about Melchizedek. Let me do a wider search to start with. Let's go here and let's search everything in the Bible Scribe app for Melchizedek. See, we get a few mentions here. There might actually be more, but sometimes the spellings in these different writings are a little difficult, so it's sometimes hard to find everything. Now, let's go to Psalm 110 first, okay? The Lord said to my Lord in Psalm 110, "Sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool." Now, that is, of course, God, Father, talking about his son Jesus and saying, "Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool." This is where we are right now. Christ is on the throne in heaven next to God, and God is waiting until all enemies have been made at the footstool of Christ. Okay, Christ will take authority over all of the enemies, authority over the entire world. And Christ is patiently at the side of the Father at this time. Verse 2, the Lord will send the rod of thy strength out of Zion, the rod of thy strength out of heaven, Zion in heaven. So the rod of his strength is coming from heaven at this point. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. He rules in the midst of the enemies on earth because the church is here. The kingdom is here. It is us, okay? We are in the midst of their enemies, of his enemies. That might make you understand why we are strangers sojourning in this planet, in this earth, right? Because we are of the kingdom of heaven, but yet we are existing here. We have to live out here underneath the rule of his enemies at this point, as he is taking authority over the earth. Thy people will be willing in the day of your power, the beautiness of holiness from the womb of morning. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. The Lord has sworn and will not repent. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So, this is the Lord the Father, Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, swearing, you, meaning thou, my son, are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, after the order of the King of Righteousness, okay? So that's interesting. Now, the way he speaks of it here, Christ is not Melchizedek. Now, there's a lot of people that believe Christ was Melchizedek. Now, I'm just saying that in this reference, it doesn't seem to equate the two. He says you will be a priest after that order. So we haven't gotten any confirmation yet that Christ is Melchizedek, although a lot of people believe that. Let me see if there's these other references here on this verse where they take us. Yeah, they take us to Genesis and Hebrews. So let's go to Genesis real quick. Genesis chapter 14. And this is after... This is Abraham? Yeah, Abram heard his brother was captive. He divided against them, etc., etc. The king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Chedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's dale, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine. Now, it's interesting too here, this Melchizedek, king of Salem, is interesting. Let's look up those words in the Hebrew. Melchizedek, Melech. Now, it's interesting. Melch is Melech. Do you see that? In the first Hebrew word here, it's Malki. That's actually the same word as Melech. You can see the Hebrew characters in Melech right here are the same as the ones here. It's the same word. He says really, the king of righteousness, king of peace, because Salem is shalom. This is the word shalom. Remember that there's no vowels in ancient Hebrew. So this is derived from the root shalom, meaning to be at peace. So what's really said here in this verse is that Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, king of peace, brought forth bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God. Interesting. Very interesting. So we're trying to reconcile all this at once. It's very difficult. It's not easy. And he blessed him, and he said, he said, "Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth." Interesting. Abraham, of course, was the father of those of faith, the father of true Israel, possessor of heaven and earth in the end. And we are, by way of our faith, inheritors with Abraham. Okay, so we are part of that lineage. We are not Israelites per se, but we are part of the lineage of Abraham because of our faith, just as the book of Hebrews says. And so it goes on, but that is about it on what the Bible says about Melchizedek, other than what's in Hebrews. So let's check Hebrews. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 5 real quick. Hebrews 5, verse 6. He says also in another place, so it says in verse 5, Christ glorified not himself to be made a high priest, but he said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." Meaning God begat Christ for this purpose. He said in another place, "Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, the king of righteousness." Okay, so a mention there. It says Melchizedek in the days of his flesh. So when he was flesh, this means Melchizedek was a real human being. Okay, he was a real king. When he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears to him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things he suffered. Being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation. So that's talking about Christ. I'm sorry, this is all talking about Christ. So verse 7, in the days of his flesh, that's talking about Christ. Because at the point Hebrews was written, Christ had already ascended to heaven, resurrected. Okay, so yeah. All it says here is that, again, Christ was a priest after the order of Melchizedek. So let's go back to my notes on Melchizedek, because there's more. There is more. Trying to find, I think it may be in the book of Kebra that has the most information on this. So in the Dead Sea Scroll called the Scroll of Melchizedek, it says for God, it's interpreted. This is a fragmented writing, by the way. These scrolls that came out of the Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes very fragmented. So I'm just going to read what's here. The interpretation for the last days refers to the captives, who something and whose something. Okay. It says, "But Melchizedek will carry out the vengeance of God's judgments, and on that day he will free them from the hand of Belial and from the hand of the spirits of his lot. To his aid shall come all the gods of justice, and he is the one who all the sons of God," etc. And it fades out because this is a fragment, okay? "This is the day of peace about which he said, through Isaiah the prophet, who said, 'How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of the messenger who announces peace, the messenger of good who announces salvation, saying to Zion, your God reigns.'" So this is one of those writings, I believe, that kind of makes it sound like it uses the term Melchizedek for the coming Messiah in a way. Melchizedek carrying out vengeance of God's judgments and then freeing those from the hand of Belial. Well, that's what Christ did when he went down to Hades, right? So this is one of those that makes you wonder, well, was Christ Melchizedek? Was maybe there a connection there? Okay. So let's go a little further in the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan. Now, I believe this is a very late pseudepigraphal writing. From the early church, it says, translated from the Ethiopic, the book of Adam and Eve, or the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan. I don't know, is this the same as the first book of Adam and Eve? That I don't think it is. I think this is a different one. Let's see here. No, this is the first book of Adam and Eve, as I understand it. But it says, from Methuselah. Methuselah is saying, my son, when about to die, command thy firstborn son Shem to take Melchizedek, son of Canaan, and grandson Aprashad. For that Melchizedek is priest of the Most High God, and to take with them the body of our father Adam from within the ark, and remove it, and lay it in the earth. And Melchizedek shall stand ministering on that mountain that is in the middle of the earth, before the body of our father Adam forever. For from that place, Noah my son, God shall work salvation for Adam and for all of his seed that believe in God. So this is saying that Melchizedek had a special place. He would minister from the mountain in the middle of the earth. Now, we would assume that that mountain is... I think most scholars would assume that that's Jerusalem, if I'm not mistaken. But it sounds like that would be the reign of Melchizedek, standing before the Father and before the body of Adam forever. For from that place, it says, God would work salvation for Adam and all that believe in God. Now that would then be a reference to, of course, the crucifixion and his descent into hell, which came out of Jerusalem, right? Golgotha, where he was crucified. So all that kind of makes sense, connects together. Now, I'm looking for a specific reference here. Oh, this is it. So in the Jewish tradition here, there is some more information about Melchizedek, okay? The ancient Targumim identifies Melchizedek as Shem, the son of Noah. Now, I'm not saying that's correct. I don't know that that's correct. But it says Shem was one of the links in the chain who transmitted the godly traditions that originated with Adam. These traditions were carefully handed down, etc., etc. So that's one view. That's a Talmudic type view, or the Targumic view, rabbinical view, the Jewish view. Then there's also some that believe he was a literal historical person, definitely historical, which we would assume from the Bible he was historical and real. Some do also consider him as a mystical figure, like a legend or a myth. And even the Jews, according to the Talmud, consider him to be a type or prototype of the Messiah. So there is a connection to the Messiah even in the Jewish belief system, right? Let's see. This is the one that got me, and I think is also in, if I'm not mistaken, in the Kebra Nagast, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, I'm just reading this to see. No, it's actually a Jewish thing. I thought it was part of the... So here's another Jewish view that I think is very interesting. Melchizedek, said to have been born from the remains of Sothonim, a king of Salem. So a literal place called Salem at the time, which essentially was peace. The word means peace, but it was a literal city of the time. And Melchizedek was born from the remains of Sothonim, according to a story. And this says told in Hebrews 7, verse 3 through 5. Let's see what that says for now. I want to see this. Hebrews 7. For Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness, and after that king of Salem, which is king of peace. Without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like unto the Son of God, abideth a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. And verily they that are the sons of Levi, who receive office to priesthood, have a commandment to take tithes of the people according to the law, which come out of the loins of Abraham. So, this is talking in terms of the tithe that the Israelites gave. But then, of course, mentioning that the first one we have recorded was Abraham giving a tenth to Melchizedek of the spoils of his war with Chedorlaomer. Chedorlaomer. That's a difficult king's name to say. So this here we have too. Now, the interesting thing part of this that most people grab onto is the without father, without mother, without descent, having neither beginning of days nor end of life. Interesting. Okay, now let's go read this Jewish view of this strange birth of this king. Now, just wanted to say thank you, HRG, so much for your support there. That's so appreciated. I really appreciate you. Very well noted. So this is the view. When Ner and Noah arrived to bury Sothonim, this king of Salem, before Melchizedek, okay, they were taken aback to see a child sitting beside the body of Sothonim, fully clothed and grown up. Not a baby, but a young boy, okay? The child blessed the Lord by saying good night and good morning to him. And Melchizedek, according to Hebrews 7, like we just read, does not have a father or mother because he has no father or mother in the family. So this is what we see in some traditions, that this boy was found beside the grave of Sothonim and simply taken and became a priest and became the priest of Melchizedek, and that he was the king of righteousness, king of peace. So this is an interesting account. I wish I could find more about that, but that seems to be, that could be a good reason for why Hebrews says he had no father and no mother and no lineage, but then God apparently made him a priest for himself, king of righteousness. Now that was before the Israelites. That was before the Israelites. That was at the time of Abraham. So I guess you just gotta think about it and think about, what does that mean? Is he just a type of Christ, a type to show what Christ was going to be, to establish the priesthood by which Christ would be made our high priest in the end? They're all good questions, and we don't have all the answers here, really. We just don't. Here's a couple just things. The city of Salem's first king, and this is again according to some Jewish sources, the first king was known either as Adonai-Zedek or Melchizedek. So there's some writings or thoughts in Jewish literature where it was Adonai-Zedek instead of Melchizedek. The Jewish writer Philo, who was a philosopher, no, he's not. Is he Jewish? I can't remember if Philo was Jewish. He may have been Jewish. But he was a philosopher, Stoic philosopher at the time of Christ, so 1st century. He spoke of Melchizedek as the Logos, the priest whose inheritance is the true God. So that's interesting, just that Philo would have said that. Now, Philo wrote extensively on the Logos idea because that was part of Greek philosophy at the time. So it may be that just Philo had the notion that perhaps Melchizedek was the Logos or connected to that thought, okay? It was very philosophical. So just realize that Philo wrote that about him. It's just an interesting connective point. The Samaritans identified the city of Salem with Mount Gerizim, their sanctuary on Mount Gerizim. Where's Mount Gerizim? Let's look that up real quick. Mount Gerizim. Okay, so that's okay. That's north of Jerusalem a little bit, but in the area. Okay, so we'll, it's acceptable as far as, where Salem would reign or Melchizedek would reign. And then those other passages in the Dead Sea Scrolls that connected that to Christ. Perhaps this is all just the same region intended here, but interesting nonetheless. Let's see here. Melchizedek mentioned here by Ignatius, the early church father, but nothing specific about him, just that he was very holy. That's what's mentioned. And this type of thing here in Ignatius, in his letter to the Philadelphians about Melchizedek, he mentions him in a list. He says, "May I have pleasure in your purity as that of Elijah or Joshua or Melchizedek or Elisha or Jeremiah or John the Baptist." So in that sense, Ignatius groups Melchizedek in with a lot of real people, so people that were not Christ. And so from Ignatius' perspective, it looks like he accepts Melchizedek along with some of the prophets and Joshua and John the Baptist, the herald of Christ, and others, but he wouldn't necessarily, as of what we see here, have said he was Christ, but he was a precursor. Okay, so that's interesting, and that's pretty much it. That's all the information I have taken down. Christine, you say that there is detail about Melchizedek, and you think it's either in Adam or Eve, or the Cave of Treasures. Let's dig deeper. I don't mind. Cave of Treasures, apocryphal work. How do I read it? Let's see here. Let's try this. Okay, here's the Cave of Treasures writing. Let's see here. Melchizedek. Come on, let's find it. We're going to find it. There it is. Okay. So in this writing, and I don't know if I know much about this writing. Introduction. Manuscript. The oldest manuscript of this is it says the Book of Adam and Eve, known in Arabic, and is not older than the 11th century, but many of the legends, it says, and traditions are identical in form with those found in the Annals of Eutychus in the 10th century and Clement's writings from the 8th century, and the Cave of Treasures, which is now generally thought to have been written in the 6th century, is what they say here. So, whether that's true or not, it's really hard to know, but that's fine. That gives us some background. So, here's the spot about Melchizedek. Does it talk? This is actually just a cross-reference between this writing and the Book of Adam. I'm trying to find this. Oh, wait, this is interesting. So here is Eusebius' church history on it, too. That could actually prove to be very helpful. This is Eusebius Church History, chapter 3 of book 1. Book 1, chapter 3. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand till I make enemies your footstool, etc. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. He says, but this Melchizedek is introduced in the Holy Scriptures. Well, let me get back to it. As the priest of the Most High God, not consecrated by anointing oil, specially prepared, and not even belonging by descent to the priesthood of the Jews. So this breaks the connection, with the Jewish priesthood. He was not a Jewish priest. He was God's priest of righteousness. Wherefore, after his order, by not after the order of the others who receive symbols and types, was our Savior proclaimed with an appeal to an oath, Christ and priest. This is interesting because this connects Christ to a priesthood outside of Israel. It's not the Levitical priesthood. It has nothing to do with the Jews. Do you realize that that means Christ is a priest after an order that is outside Israel? So yet again, we have confirmation that our priest has nothing to do with Mosaic law. Jesus Christ, our priest, has zero to do with the Mosaic law. Our priest came before the law. Do you see that? So again, this should be a confirmation to you that we do not follow the Mosaic law. We simply follow God's commands and Christ's commands, and we do not sin, but we do not follow Mosaic law. That was for Israel. Our priest is outside of the Mosaic law. It continues here. In verse 18 of this section, history therefore does not relate that he was appointed corporeally by the Jews, nor that he belonged to the lineage of priests, but that he came into existence from God himself, before the morning star, that is, before the organization of the world, and he had obtained an immortal and undecaying priesthood for eternal ages. This is really what Melchizedek is about, isn't it? This is about God establishing the priesthood that would be eternal and undecaying, as it says, throughout all ages of history. So, wow, that's incredible. I told you that's why I wanted Eusebius in my tool. I put it in just a week or two ago, his church history. It's so good. He has so many good things in there. Let's continue here a little bit. But it is a great and convincing proof of his incorporeal and divine unction that Christ alone of all those who have ever existed is even to the present day called Christ by all men throughout the world, and is confessed and witnessed to under this name, and is commemorated by both Greeks and barbarians, even to this day is honored as a king by his followers throughout the world, and is admired more than a prophet, glorified the only true and high priest of God. Besides all of this, as the pre-existent Word of God, called into being before all ages, he has received august honor from the Father and is worshipped as God, meaning as divinity. Okay, it doesn't mean he's worshipped as his Father. He's just worshipped as the God he is, the divinity he is. And most wonderful of all is the fact that we who have consecrated ourselves to him, to Christ, honor him with our voices, the sound of our words, and the complete elevation of soul, so that we choose to give testimony unto him rather than to preserve our own lives. Wow, isn't that the crux of Christianity? That's the things that we have lost of Christianity, in my opinion, in the modern time. That we choose to give testimony of him rather than preserve our lives. And throughout history, the majority of Christians have suffered and been persecuted because of the testimony. And that's really, as I'm learning more and more, that is how we connect to Christianity in general, is through persecution because of our testimony of who he is. And it's not necessarily all the doctrine that we ascribe to Christianity. It's not all the little bits and pieces. It's literally the gospel of Jesus Christ, who Christ is. His priesthood, so to speak, the eternal priesthood, and the fact that he is the Son of God. All the things it just talked about. Our testimony being very simple and being about the gospel, and to us being more important to give that than to keep our lives as special or worthy. of being just held on to. That we give that up in deference to preaching the gospel to people. And I think that, that to me makes me feel, it makes it so clear and easy to understand that we connect to God by teaching people, by telling people about him. All right. Well, that's Eusebius. So that took us a long way. And I didn't find yet, though, the what you said, Christine, about the Cave of Treasures writing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find that in the time we've got here, because that is the only mention I see there. Let me try this. Cave of Treasures and then Melchizedek. Okay, let's see. Oh, that's a locked document I can't get to. There's not many results. Come on now. Genealogy of Jesus. Let's see. Does this give us anything? Okay, here's an interesting little bit about it. Maybe this will tell us something. It's not going to show it very big for you guys, but a distinct tradition found in the Cave of Treasures, probably in Syriac from about the 6th century. The genealogy of Jesus from Adam down to Mary, given much as in Matthew, with omissions filled in, and remarkably, the mother of each generation provided. Mary is made a cousin of Joseph, as her father Jonachar was a son of Mathan and twin brother of Jacob, etc., etc. I don't see it talking about Melchizedek here. It doesn't mention Melchizedek there. Dadgummit. This is making it maddening. I'm getting mad. Yeah, it's not going to help me out very much. Ain't buying it. I see your post there. Search for 4 quarters of the earth and Cave of Treasures talks about Melchizedek in that part. Okay, well, I'm getting frustrated, so I may put this off until next time. Red Raven, why are you getting censored, man? I don't understand it. I'm not doing it. You can see I'm working hard over here. I'm not censoring anybody. Yeah, Linda Connor, I think you're right. Sounds like a great video. If I could put all this together, I might do that. I think that'd be great. I think the important thing, and I'll just stop here with this. I will look up those references, Christine, and Ain't Buying It. I'm going to look at that stuff up. I'm going to try to find it the best I can. And Christine, you had said, yeah, okay. I'm just going to take that down as a note. I would just say that I think what we've uncovered today and talked just now about, the important thing about Melchizedek, and from all the indications we got, was that Melchizedek was a real person. May have had some interesting stuff in his origins. We don't know exactly what of that is true. If this orphan child was just found beside the grave of the king of Salem, the prior king, and then God made him into this priest. Who knows? But the indications we get from the writings is that he was definitely a real human, and he was definitely real at that time. And that in him, God established a priesthood that was outside the law. It was for all time and for all people. And that's why Christ was of that priesthood, so that we could, through Christ, gain access to the Father. And so all of that is the crux. That's the real meat of this whole discussion, that we have the high priest that is perfect for exactly what we need him for. And king. He's priest and king after the order of Melchizedek. So it all makes sense kind of when we look at it like that. Well, this has been fun. Let's go on to our next topic, because we spent a lot of time there, and we got a lot to talk about. So Pam, you mentioned one here. Let's see if I can get to yours. Who had the keys and let Satan out of the pit? So who had the keys to let Satan out of the pit? That's an interesting question. It's a hard question. I don't know right off the top of my head. Let me do this. I mean, we can go, of course, and I'll just go real quick with you guys to Revelation chapter 20. And we'll just read the few verses there real quick to refresh ourselves. Chapter 20, Revelation. Okay, an angel came down from heaven with the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. So I guess this is probably the person or being that we're talking about. And cast him in the bottomless pit and shut him up. And he would be loosed then after that for a little season. So maybe the assumption we have here, it doesn't say literally that this same angel released him from Satan or from prison. But we would assume that perhaps the same angel has the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. Now, we don't get any information there about who this angel is exactly. So we are left to kind of search for this. And I don't think I've done this exercise before, looked for this specific thing. Let me do this search real quick and see if I can figure out the best way. Key. Let's try key and pit as the search terms here. In Revelation 9:1, we had that verse similar. The fifth angel sounded, I saw a star fall from heaven to earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. That again is going to be reference to an angel. Anytime we hear of a star falling to earth, and I'm very careful with this because this angel apparently is probably not a bad angel. It's not like a fallen angel. But when a star comes from heaven to earth, this is an angel or either a good or a bad angel. So what we have here is an angel that is, again, given the key to the bottomless pit. Now, in the context of Revelation 9, let's think a little bit about this as I close some of these tabs and free up some memory on my computer. The angel was given the key to the bottomless pit. He opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit. So this is the fifth trumpet being sounded. Now, this is important because in the context of Revelation, what's happening here is the sixth and the trumpets in general, as I understand them, are being blown, and this is happening in our past. The trumpets being blown here are the trumpets of judgment upon the nations of earth. And so the things we are seeing here, as I understand it, the seven trumpets, let's see, the trumpets. The fourth angel sounded, the sun was smitten. The third angel sounded, a star fell from heaven and hit the waters and made them bitter. The second angel sounded, and a mountain burning with fire is cast into the sea. Well, we had things like that happening in Rome, of course, both with Mount Vesuvius and with others, Mount Etna, and all sorts of eruptions and mountains being cast down and that kind of thing. So these trumpets, just so you understand my perspective, is that these trumpets were judgments against the nations. The trumpets being blown and then these horrible things happening. So following along in where we are now, this key given to this angel that falls from heaven and has the key now to the bottomless pit, apparently being the same one that locks Satan up in the bottomless pit for the 1,000 years, which I believe, of course, happened just after this time period, around the time of the 6th century, 5th or 6th century. So to me, this all makes sense. It all fits together. But just so you're aware of the time period of when this angel was binding Satan, I feel like it was in the 5th or 6th century. And that Satan was bound for 1,000 years leading up to about the 15th, 16th century, which would have been the age of enlightenment, the rebirth, right? The Renaissance is the rebirth. Well, whose rebirth was it? It might have been Satan's rebirth. Scary, huh? So just be aware that that's the context we're talking about. So whatever angel this is, and again, just to note, the word angel being angelos or agelos in the Greek means messenger. It was often used as an angel, and it generally means angel, but it doesn't always mean angel. To us, by the word, our word angel comes from this Greek word, angelos or agelos in the Greek, which is weird because our word means something different than theirs did. It doesn't just mean a messenger. Ours means a specific type of messenger, an angelic messenger, but theirs could mean a variety of things. So just be aware of that. The messenger here that comes from heaven with the key, we assume to be a holy, righteous angel. That's tradition. Just be aware of the Greek behind it. Now let's see if anything else. Gospel of Nicodemus, talking about the key of Hades. The key or keys. Let's see. I did key. So an interesting thing might be to search Gospel of Nicodemus. Let's see if I can do that. Gospel of Nicodemus for the key. Oh, come on. Oh, it's the descent into hell I have to search for. Descent into hell. There we go. Now it's just the same verse. So it says that Satan is the holder of the key of Hades at the time when, of course, Gospel of Nicodemus was written about the time when Christ went down there. Okay, so Christ goes down there. At that time, Satan is the holder of the key of Hades. Okay. Let me try this. I want to see, because the Gospel of Nicodemus, I believe, talks about when Satan is bound. Let me just see if I can find this. I think it's in there. Okay, here we go. Hades is talking, okay? In the Gospel of Nicodemus, Beliar and Hades, Satan and Hades talk back and forth. So this is, Hades answers him, who is this you brought down here? It's Jesus. And Satan says, it is the same Jesus that rose Lazarus. Hades says, you did a bad thing. He probably calls Satan out about 10 ways from Sunday and is mad at him. It says, if you bring him to me, we'll set free all that are shut up here and and are bound in chains. Okay, that's not the binding of Satan. So I'm not seeing the binding of Satan at this point, which is frustrating. So let me see if I can find it again in this writing. Okay, here's a statement, chapter 6, verse 2. All the legions of devils were stricken with fear and cried out, "Where are you, Jesus, a man so mighty and bright in majesty? Peradventure thou art that Jesus, of whom Satan our prince said that by the death of the cross he would receive dominion of the whole world. Then did the King of glory and his majesty trample upon death, lay hold on Satan, and deliver him into the power of Hades, and drew Adam to him unto his own brightness." So I don't know if that's helping us answer it all. That's giving us a little detail, but this is saying that Christ delivered Satan to Hades And then that would sort of maybe hint that Hades is the one that bound Satan. Hades is the prince of the underworld, by the way, the ruler of the underworld. So that's a possibility, okay, that Hades was the one that bound Satan. I don't know for sure because Christ delivered Satan to him. I don't know if that's 100% on that, but that's just a thought. So that being said, let's see what else we got here in, again, Eusebius maybe mentioning this. No, that's not a mention of Satan's binding. So this would be a tough one for me to finish up and find out. I have to do some research on this one to get all the way there, Pam, to get to it. Oh, I didn't catch up to you guys on the chat there. But yeah, I do think that that's worth some more research. So who really loosed Satan from hell? We really didn't find out, but we may have an idea. We'll continue to think about that one, I think. Okay, let's go to the next topic then. Let's see. Christine, you asked about Cain's genealogy, if his line was wiped out after the flood. Was Cain's genealogy wiped out at the flood? That's what we want to know. That's a tough one too. You guys are you're just getting me today. This is going to be hard. Let's go to the Bible real quick and see if we can find this just in the Bible. And that'll be a hard thing to find, but we'll see. What do we got here? Adam bare Cain in Genesis 4. And then Cain kills his brother. And Cain is made a wanderer on the earth, really sent out. And Cain did have lineage. He built a city, and he called the name of the city Enoch after his son. But this is not the Enoch that went to heaven. This is a different Enoch, by the way. But Cain had a son named Enoch, and he named his city after him. Let's see. And Adam knew Eve again and bore a son named Seth because he wanted to make up for Cain. So that's interesting. Where else do we go here? Oh, thank you so much, HRG. Yeah, God bless you today. Thank you for that support. I appreciate it. All right. Stacia, you say, I've heard the fallen angel Liberty. Clearly that is a Western term, unsure of the biblical name. Oh, that's interesting. So that's on the previous topic, yeah. Okay. All right. Now, 1 John mentions Cain. Hebrews mentions Cain. Let's look at Hebrews first. By faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, but by it he being dead yet speaks. Okay, so that was speaking really about the faith of Abel and not that of Cain. Cain did not have faith. Okay, so that doesn't help us much. 1 John 3:12. Let's go here. For this is the message you heard from the beginning, that you should love one another, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore he slew him? Because his own works were evil, and his brothers were righteous. Marvel not, my brothers, if the world hates you. So he's essentially saying that's what the world's all about, is killing those who are righteous. It's an interesting thought. So Cain here, I'm trying to see, like, Christine, where is Cain mentioned in genealogy? I don't fully grasp that. Like, where is it mentioned in genealogy? Am I missing it? Here in Joshua 15, maybe? Joshua 15:57. Okay, so here is a somewhat of a genealogy, but what is this? This is the inheritance of the tribe of children of Judah according to their families. Okay, etc., 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 all the way down here. Jezreel, Jokdeam, Zanoah, Cain, Gibeah, Timnah, 10 cities with villages, Halhol, Bethzor, and Gedor. This, to me, I don't think this is Cain. This is not the Cain, if this is what you're talking about. This is not the Cain that was Adam's son. This is way down in the line of Jews, Israelites, way down. So you can see all the generations that were before this person. So I don't think this is Cain and Abel Cain. So Christine, you're saying Genesis 4. Let's just go to Genesis 4. Genesis 4. Okay. Cain brought the fruit of the ground. Cain offering. Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. You've driven me out from the face of the earth. From thy face I will be hid, a fugitive. God does proclaim that no one should slay Cain. Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife and had Enoch and made a city. Okay. So you're saying it's verse 17 through 22-ish? Yeah. I mean, as far as the lineage being mentioned, I mean, I don't know, other than notice this Lamech here, and we've talked about this before. Do you guys remember we talked about this before? We talked about Lamech. And the reality was we found out that this lineage here was totally different than Noah's, because Noah's father's name was Lamech. But this is not Noah's father right here. This is not Noah's father. This is a different Lamech in the line of Cain. So, yes, you're right, Christine, that this lineage here, it just goes in dead ends, right? Cain's lineage just kind of dead ends. Ain't buying it. You're saying you think... I'm trying to follow all your chats. You're chatting a lot. So let's see here. You say, ain't buying it, that we are still dealing with them. They weren't all wiped out. Maybe they came from Canaan, who I understand came from Noah's wife, and Ham. Why the curse? And then you mentioned Joyce, or Dr. Joy, or Joyce Pugh, who said when Noah got drunk on the wine and Ham did something, the something was defiling Noah's wife. Yeah, that's something that people have talked about, but in Jewish tradition, rabbinical, that is said in Jewish tradition, not anywhere else that I've found in Jewish rabbinical references, that they said that it was a sexual sin that Ham defiled his wife, and that's what literally the Jewish phrase of uncovering the nakedness of his father meant, because they're seen as one flesh, right? Because they have joined in marriage, in physical union. And so the rabbinical teaching is that, yes, that was sexual sin. Ham went in unto his mother and had intercourse with his mother because Noah was drunk, okay? And so that was the sin and the reason for the curse and all of that on was it Ham and his son Canaan, right? Terry Barnes, yeah, your mention of Cain, the original Cain, being killed by an arrow by his blind grandson, that is a traditional story. Yes, that's what happened. I don't remember where I've read that, but I have read that. So yeah, you're right. You got it. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I think that, I don't want to necessarily mix up the line of Cain with Ham and Canaan. Okay, I think that's different. Now, some of you guys comments on the fact that we're still dealing with it, so to speak, dealing with them, the line of Cain. That line, if you want to say that, it's fine to say that, but like it just said in that passage we read, that Cain was of the wicked one. Now, there's a lot of speculation on that somehow was a genetic thing, but it really was just like the synagogue of Satan. They were of their father, the devil. And why does Christ say that? He says it because they were doing the works of their father. They were doing the works of the devil. Christ would have said, if you do the works of your Father in heaven, then you are his child. You're his son, right? And you have an inheritance with me. So that was the fathership. It wasn't a genetic, physical thing. It was a spiritual thing. Okay, so you have to realize that when Christ said that stuff, he wasn't referring to a flesh and blood lineage all the way from Cain through the flood, all the way to like his day, Jerusalem. That wasn't what he was saying. But there's a lot of teachers online that are teaching that because they get a lot of views for it. They get a lot of attention for that, but that's not supported. It's just not supported. What I believe is truly that if you're trying to follow the line of Nephilim through the flood, then what you've got to do is you've got to go to Ham and his son Canaan that was cursed, because I believe the Canaanites all came out of Canaan, who was the son of Ham, son of Noah. And what they did was they perpetuated the practices that came before the flood because they were wicked in their hearts. Obviously, Ham was wicked. He laid with his mother and took advantage of his dad, right? And so all these things together mean that when they went off and were, banished to Canaan, that Canaan and Ham and his lineage started all these different civilizations in Canaan that became wicked races, and they perpetuated the practices of calling down angels, and then having intercourse with them to produce giants and royal lines of blood that they could then use to give themselves power. If you had a family in your nation that was all 12 feet tall, then you had an advantage in battle, and then you would use that to build power in the way that they did, which was by warring against one another. And that all came again after the flood, just like it had before the flood. It was similar. And so that to me is the way you trace that. I don't think you can make a good case. There's no evidence-based case to make for any of those lines surviving in a physical way past the flood. I just don't see any references to that. But, Stacy, you mentioned Noah's sons' wives. I mean, that's possible, but then, of course, they don't track lineage through women. They only tracked lineage through men. So I guess it's possible if one of their wives was a Cainite, not a Canaanite, but a Cainite. But again, it doesn't matter. Why does that matter? Why do you have to have a physical lineage for a spiritual problem, right? The problem is spiritual. And I just don't think it's relevant. I personally don't think it's relevant. But yeah, if you guys find any information or sourcing for this stuff, then let me know. Christine, you're mentioning Leviticus 18:7. So let me go there real quick. Let's take a look at that. Oh, right. This is the verse where Ham says, or sees the, quote, nakedness of his father. You shall not uncover her nakedness. Yeah.
that's part of why the Jewish rabbinical writings say that, that's what he did. He uncovered his wife. Noah was over here stumbling around and drunk in a stupor, and Ham just went in and had sex with his own mother, which was horrible. So, Christine, you ask again, why mention Cain's lineage if it was wiped out? I don't know. They did that with a lot of people, though. They did that they didn't mention a ton of his lineage, just mentioning, the first few generations after Cain. And it could have just been because it seemed like God protected Cain, didn't it? After Cain did what he did, and then God says, he pronounces a curse on anyone that would kill Cain, right? Even after Cain was wicked and did this whole thing and killed somebody, he said anyone that kills Cain is going to have vengeance upon them, right? So in a way, God was kind of protecting Cain, even though he had been the first one to commit murder ever. So perhaps it's to show that God protected his lineage in some way, in a very small way. So by showing the next few generations in that small little section in Genesis 4, right? I don't know. That's a guess, but they're, I don't know that it's, I don't know that it's such an important thing as far as why that lineage is there. I think it's just there. There's a few places in the scriptures where we have lineages where we're not really sure, like, why did they talk about that? I don't know. So anyway. Okay, what's the next topic? What was the purpose of the saints that rose or resurrected with Christ? What was the purpose of this? This was from Looking Up for Him, Pilgrim. So, this is a tough one for me, looking up for him. So you're asking about the saints that were resurrected with Christ. I've had a hard time recently trying to fully understand this specific thing. And the reason is because there's not a lot of reference to many people being resurrected at the time of Christ. And by the way, the correct understanding of resurrection is not necessarily being brought back to earth. Like, people being resurrected in terms of the way resurrection was talked about was to heaven, taken out of Hades and taken to heaven. Now, the understanding of final resurrection is that it is physical. You do get a body again. It's a remade body, and it is physical in some sense, but that at that time, after that resurrection at the end of time, at the Great White Throne Judgment, that you will be given a new body and you will be then either with Christ and God in heaven or on the new earth. And it will be different than it is now. Not corruptible like it is now. So the problem I'm having with my study and research on this is that it's hard to really pin down who, if any, and how many and how were they resurrected at the time of Christ's descent into Hades, at his death and resurrection. Because the only real reference I have for much of that is the Gospel of Nicodemus, the second part, the descent into hell that we just looked at a minute ago, and the book of Revelation, where it talks about the saints reigning with him during 1,000 years. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about the saints in Revelation that would reign with him for the 1,000 years was that if we understand Revelation correctly, and like I said, the 7 trumpets being blown and a lot of that stuff having to do with the time of ancient Rome and the centuries of persecution that the church went through after 70 AD, after Christ, that we realize that the saints that are being talked about, the martyrs and saints being talked about, died during, I don't know, the first few hundred years after Christ. And so if it's talking about those saints, then we have to ask ourselves, when did they go to heaven? But there's a lot of things going on there that have to be considered. A lot of things. Going back to when Christ was resurrected in 30 AD, we do see in the Gospel of Nicodemus and in the Bible where Christ tells the thief on the cross, "You will be with me today or in paradise," right? That word paradise is one that is almost exclusively used for the Garden of Eden, which I have talked about with you guys before and said, yes, the Garden of Eden, as far as we understand it, is actually a part of one of the lowest levels of heaven. So in all the prophecies about the restoration of Adam to the garden, all those prophecies seem to have a heavenly connotation, that the garden is in heaven, kept until the time when Adam will be restored to it. And so you can understand why, if that's the case, why when Adam sinned and fell from his original state of glory, that he had to leave the garden, because he and Eve had become more physical than they were prior. Okay, so all those things connect, but just be aware when Christ is on the cross telling the thief, "Today you will be with me in paradise," that has very specific connotations to the heavenly Garden of Eden. And so then in the Gospel of Nicodemus, it talks about the same thing. It mentions paradise. But the problem is there's not much written about that other than that. And so it's hard to know if there was a resurrection at that time of some of the patriarchs like Adam and Moses and Abraham taken to the Garden of Eden at that time, okay, to be restored to the garden, to feast with God in heaven. There's a lot of that talk, but it's really hard to pin down. We're not given real detailed specifics on all of this stuff. So I have a hard time placing all these things when we're talking about, as you ask, looking up for him, Pilgrim. You ask about the purpose of the saints resurrected with Christ. I don't know if I can tell you specifically who exactly those were. There were some. We see in both the Gospel of Nicodemus and in the Bible, in the Gospels, that some people were resurrected. When Christ was resurrected, graves were opened. Some people saw people they knew had died, and then they were in the city for a short time. The Gospel of Nicodemus says they had specific instructions from the angel Michael, and that they went to across the Jordan River for Passover or something like that, and then they were taken from earth. Okay, they were taken to heaven. So there's all that you kind of got to deal with when you're trying to understand exactly who and what happened at that time as far as being resurrected to heaven. So it's hard for me to answer your question, is what I'm trying to get to, looking up for him, Pilgrim. It's very hard for me to answer it very specifically. But the purpose of the saints that were resurrected and reigned with Christ during the 1,000 years, okay, if that's what we're talking about, the saints in Revelation chapter 20, verse 1, who would reign with Christ for the 1,000 years at his throne in heaven, then those saints, their purpose was to judge the nations. Okay, it's talked about in a few different places. I'm not going to pull up references today. We're running real short on time. So those saints were said to be reigning with Christ in judgment over the wickedness of the nations. Okay, so part of the Revelation's outpouring of judgments and all, the saints had some role in some of that. Like they were up there in heaven with God, with Christ and God, judging the nations at that time. So that's what I would tell you as far as the answer, as far as their purpose. But as far as who they were, and then you asked also briefly about what happened while they roamed the earth and afterwards. I don't have any record of any saints roaming the earth, okay, after they had reigned with Christ in heaven. That was it. They stayed with Christ. They didn't come back. And so I don't know exactly what you're referring to with that part of the question, but to me, I don't have an answer for that, okay? Amber, you said you think you just read about some of this in Eusebius. Well, that's awesome. It'd probably be great. If you have a reference or something, I can take a look at it. I think I need to make myself a task, and that is to read back through Eusebius. I've read more than half of it, but I don't think I've read all of it. But I need to. I need to finish, and I would like to read back through it. There's so many cross references to be made there that, yeah, it's a huge task, but it's worth it. Let's do this. I have a couple questions I did not get to today, and Linda, yours is one about women teaching and preaching. I don't know that I have a lot of information. Maybe I'll look at some of that this week and start to think more about it. I don't think I've taught on women preaching or teaching in the context of the church and what that means according to Scripture. But I can look at that if you can afford me some time. And then CCAC, you mentioned just now, you asked about technology in heaven. You ask if we just ride horses and wear robes in heaven, or we have normal clothing like in 2025. And I think I would answer CCAC in that what I have seen in the writings, and I'll just say this briefly, is that in heaven, according to the things I've read, everyone appears to be about at your prime of life, like your age at the prime of life, like about 25 or 30. So when you go to heaven, your appearance is of that age time period. The only other thing I've seen is, I think I may have seen some references by some people that talk about babies being in heaven, babies that were killed as an infant or in the womb, those babies being in heaven as a child, but maybe perhaps even growing to the age of kind of like 25, 30. And then that's their age in heaven forever. So that doesn't speak to clothing. Now, I guess all I could say in terms of clothing was there's no reference to any writing that's going to talk about that, like what people wear in heaven. But I have seen some near-death experience accounts from people that I trust. You know, there's a lot of them out there, so you kind of got to learn who you can trust and who you can't. But in some of those experiences, people saw their relatives in their clothes from where they, their time period. So I never heard anyone say that my family was all wearing white robes when I saw them, or it was just they were wearing plain clothes that looked like normal clothes to you or I. So what does that mean? Does that mean they were all wearing khakis and white polos? I don't know. I just don't know. But there's just no writings that really tell us about the clothing that people would wear. Now, I guess I should say this, there are the white robes of the saints that's talked about in many writings. Now, the problem with those statements is that even in Revelation, when it says the white robes, it really is talking about a garment, white garments. It's hard to know whether those garments are literally robes like a tunic, or if that's your new body that's being talked about. Because the saints will go to heaven and get a new body, okay? A new wrapping, a new covering, okay? And so it's really hard to know whether those white robes being talked about with the saints is specific robes that they wear, like a choir robe, or if it's literally the brand new body that has the glory intended for it by the Father. That's very bright in color and bright in nature. I don't know for sure. So that's a hard thing to know too. So all that is just to say that's what I know and have heard about what will kind of be like in heaven. I hope that somewhat answers you, CCAC. Sorry we didn't get to you last week. Yeah, no problem. Ain't buying it. You ask about the apple in the garden. I'll just throw out there that you need to think more in terms of the grape. The fruit that it's talking about in most of the ancient texts and in the book of Jubilees and Jasher is the grape. It's the vine of the earth. So when the flood occurred, there's one of these writings, and I'm not remembering which one at this moment, maybe Jubilees, that the flood was so great it reached up into the Garden of Eden and washed out the vine, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what was that? It fell to earth, and then Noah used it to plant what? His vineyards. And he grew the grapes and wine from that. It's from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's where wine comes from. So it's grapes. It was never an apple. That's something that Western theology kind of made up. Okay? It was never an apple. Yeah, they do. They shove the apple in our face like you're talking about, like the company Apple. Yeah, they use that as a sign for the bite of the apple of the garden because they are pledging allegiance to their master, right? Satan, who caused Eve to sin. So they're stupid, okay? These occultists, just so you're aware, they're stupid and they're idiotic, and they just take whatever they want from all these different places, Gnosticism, esotericism. They'll make it up, and they'll just take it and appropriate it as their symbology because they only have allegiance to one thing, and that's Satan himself. So whatever makes them, tickles their fancy, they'll do it. But they're total, they're ingrates. Yeah, I agree. Ain't buying it. You shouldn't. Don't get your children addicted to technology. Don't do it. I didn't even know how families function in this day and age. We barely made it through with our kids. It felt like at times we were struggling to help them understand the dangers of those things. And I hate to admit, still our lives are very wrapped around those devices and things like that. It's very hard in this day and age to function without all of that connectivity, And so I hate that it's that way, but it is that way. Well, guys, I think we're good today. We've done so much. We've gone through a lot. I hope that it has helped you in some way. And I just appreciate you guys being a part of this, being a part of helping me. You help me as much as I help you guys. So thank you for that. You push me in different directions that I think, again, like iron sharpens iron, but you guys, you force me to look into some things sometimes that I'm not necessarily interested in, but you make me interested in them. So you've even done that today. There's some things that we have to still work on, to get there. But thank you so much for the time this morning. And again, I just want to wish you a happy Easter, Resurrection weekend. I hope that you have a great time with your families, and that any celebration you do have centers around Christ and his resurrection. That's all it's about. That's all it's about. And I just appreciate you guys giving me this time on this day. That is special in and of itself. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope it has made your day better. God bless you and take care. Bye, guys.